I never imagined that attending my own son's corporate party would turn into the most humiliating moment of my life, until it became the most satisfying. The champagne glass in my hand was still full when my daughter-in-law looked me up and down with that poisonous smile and said loud enough for everyone to hear that I looked like the cleaning lady who had wandered into the wrong event. But what she didn't know was that the woman she was mocking owned 43% of the company where she worked, and I was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent the last 3 decades building a tech empire from my garage in San Francisco. When I started Chen Solutions in 1995, I had nothing but a computer science degree, $700 in savings, and a vision that everyone said was impossible. My husband David supported me through those early years when we ate ramen noodles for dinner, and I coded until 3 a.m. We built something extraordinary together, and when he passed away 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer, I made a promise at his grave that I would keep growing what we started. Our son Michael grew up watching me work, seeing the sacrifices and the victories. He went to Stanford, got his MBA, and joined a promising startup called TechVista 3 years ago. I was proud of him for making his own way, not relying on the Chen name or asking me for connections. What Michael didn't know was that 2 years ago, when TechVista was struggling and about to go under, I had quietly invested through a private equity firm I control. I didn't tell him because I wanted him to succeed on his own merits, to feel that sense of accomplishment without thinking his mother had bought his career. Then he met Vanessa. Vanessa Rodriguez joined TechVista 18 months ago as a marketing director. She was beautiful, ambitious, and from what Michael told me, brilliant at her job. They started dating within 3 months, and 6 months after that, they were engaged. I met her exactly twice before the wedding, both times brief lunches where she was polite but distant, checking her phone constantly and making it clear she had more important places to be. Something about her made me uncomfortable, but I told myself I was being overprotective, that no woman would ever seem good enough for my only child. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more real-life dramas like this, please hit that subscribe button. We're working toward our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Just click that red subscribe button below. It takes 2 seconds and helps this channel grow tremendously. The wedding was lavish, held at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Vanessa's family was there in force, loud and celebratory, while I sat quietly with my sister and a few close friends. During the reception, I overheard Vanessa's mother talking to someone about how her daughter had really married up, how the Chen family must have serious money, even though I dressed like a librarian. I let it go. It was her daughter's wedding day. People say things when they're excited, but after the wedding, things got worse. Michael and Vanessa moved into a beautiful apartment in Pacific Heights that I suspected was beyond his salary range, but I didn't ask questions. When they came for Sunday dinners at my modest home in the Sunset District, Vanessa would look around with barely concealed disdain, making comments about how dark it was or how outdated the kitchen looked. She would answer my questions with one-word responses while scrolling through Instagram. And twice I caught her rolling her eyes when I talked about my volunteer work with coding programs for underprivileged kids. Michael didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't want to. He was so in love, so happy, and I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who complained about not being appreciated. I had read enough advice columns to know that was a fast track to losing your son. So I smiled, I stayed quiet, and I told myself that maybe Vanessa was just young. Maybe she would warm up to me eventually. Then came the invitation to TechVista's annual gala. The company had recently closed a major deal with a Japanese tech firm, and they were celebrating with a black tie event at the Fairmont Hotel. Michael called me excited, saying he had specifically requested that I be invited, that he wanted me to see where he worked and meet his colleagues. I was touched. I went out and bought a new dress, nothing too fancy, a simple navy blue cocktail dress from Nordstrom, and I had my hair done at the salon for the first time in months. The night of the gala was cold and foggy, typical San Francisco November weather. I took an Uber to the Fairmont, clutching my small purse and feeling nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. I'd given presentations to venture capitalists, I had negotiated million-dollar deals. I had been interviewed by Forbes and TechCrunch, but walking into that glittering ballroom where I knew no one made my stomach twist with anxiety. The ballroom was spectacular, all crystal chandeliers and gold accents, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights barely visible through the fog. There must have been 300 people there, all dressed to the nines, holding champagne glasses and laughing in clusters. A string quartet played in one corner, and servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with trays of appetizers that probably cost more per bite than most people's lunch. I spotted Michael across the room talking to a group of men in expensive suits. He looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so confident and grown up. My heart swelled with pride. I started making my way toward him, weaving through the crowd, when a hand grabbed my arm. Your subscription could be the one that gets us to 1,000, and that would mean the world. If you haven't already, take a moment to click subscribe. It's free, it's easy, and it helps us create more content like this that you love. It was Vanessa, and she was not smiling. She looked absolutely stunning in a red designer gown that must have cost thousands, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate updo, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. But her eyes when she looked at me were cold, assessing, and clearly finding me lacking. "Margaret," she said, and her tone made my name sound like an inconvenience. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, confused. "Michael invited me. He called last week and asked me to come." She glanced around quickly, then pulled me slightly away from the nearest group of people. "He didn't mention that to me. This is a professional event, Margaret, for employees and important clients. It's not really appropriate for family members, especially dressed like that." I looked down at my dress, suddenly feeling like I was wearing a burlap sack. "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" Vanessa's smile was practiced and cruel. "Nothing, if you were attending a PTA meeting in the suburbs. But this is a corporate gala. These people are executives, investors, industry leaders. You look like someone's housekeeper who wandered in by mistake." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot with humiliation, and I was suddenly intensely aware of every person around us, wondering if they had heard, if they were looking at me and thinking the same thing. "I should go," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "That's probably best," Vanessa agreed, already turning away. "I'll tell Michael you weren't feeling well. He'll understand." But as she started to walk away, she turned back for one more cut. "Oh, and Margaret? In the future, maybe call before showing up to Michael's work events. He's trying to build a career here, and having his mother show up looking like that doesn't exactly help his image. People make judgments, you know. They see you, and they wonder what kind of family he comes from." Something inside me snapped. Not with anger, not yet, but with a crystal-clear certainty that I was done being disrespected by this woman. I had been silent for too long, had made too many excuses, had tried too hard to be the accommodating mother-in-law. But there were limits, and Vanessa had just crossed them. "Is that so?" I said quietly. Vanessa was already walking away, one hand raised in a dismissive wave, heading toward a group that included the CEO of TechVista, Gregory Walsh, a man I had met several times in board meetings, though he had no idea I was Michael's mother. I took a deep breath, set my champagne glass on a nearby table, and followed her. The group Vanessa joined was clearly important. Gregory was there, along with Patricia Kim, the CFO, and 3 people I recognized as the lead investors from Redwood Capital, the firm that had brought me into the TechVista deal 2 years ago. They all knew me, but in a completely different context. To them, I was Margaret Chen, the silent tech mogul who had saved their investment by injecting capital and strategic guidance into a failing company. Vanessa was already talking, animated and confident, her hand on Gregory's arm in a familiar way that made me raise my eyebrows. She was telling some story about a client dinner, and the group was laughing at all the right moments. She was good at this, I had to admit. She knew how to work a room, how to make people feel charmed. Before you find out what happens next, I want to ask you to do something for me. If this story is keeping you hooked, click that subscribe button right now. We're building a community here, trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and every single one counts. Be part of this journey with us. Then Gregory spotted me approaching, and his entire face changed. He broke into a huge smile, the kind of smile you give someone who essentially controls your company's future. "Margaret," he exclaimed, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I had no idea you were coming tonight. This is such an honor. Everyone, this is Margaret Chen." The reaction was immediate. Patricia's eyes widened. The Redwood Capital investors turned to me with delighted expressions, immediately moving closer. Vanessa's hand dropped from Gregory's arm, and I saw confusion flicker across her face. "You know each other?" she asked, looking between me and Gregory. "Know each other?" Gregory laughed. "Vanessa, Margaret Chen is one of our primary investors. She basically saved this company 2 years ago. Without her, none of us would be here tonight." I watched the color drain from Vanessa's face. "Investor," she repeated faintly. Patricia jumped in, effusive in a way I found slightly embarrassing. "Margaret is a legend in the industry. Chen Solutions revolutionized cloud security protocols in the early 2000s. She's been on the Forbes list of self-made women multiple times. How did you manage to get her to come tonight, Gregory?" "Actually," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I'm here because my son invited me. Michael Chen works here. I believe you know him, Vanessa." The silence that followed was exquisite. I watched Vanessa's brain trying to process the information, saw the moment understanding hit her like a freight train. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her perfectly made-up face went through several shades of pale. "Your son," she whispered. "Michael is your son." "Yes," I confirmed. "And you're my daughter-in-law. We met at your wedding, though we didn't get much chance to talk. You seemed very busy that day." Gregory looked confused. "Wait, you two are related? Vanessa, you never mentioned that Michael's mother was Margaret Chen." Vanessa couldn't speak. I actually felt a moment of pity for her, watching her entire worldview rearrange itself in real time. But then I remembered her words from 5 minutes ago, about me looking like a housekeeper, about how I was damaging Michael's image, about how I should call before showing up to his work events. One of the Redwood Capital investors, a sharp woman named Linda Torres, was looking at Vanessa with open curiosity. "I'm confused. If you're married to Margaret's son, how did you not know she was an investor in Tech Vista?" "I keep my investments private," I said smoothly. "I prefer to let companies operate without interference from silent partners. Michael doesn't know about my involvement here, and I'd appreciate it if everyone could keep it that way for now. I don't want him to think his success is anything other than his own hard work." Of course, Gregory said quickly, though I could see the wheels turning in his head. "But Margaret, if you're Michael's mother, we should have been treating you like family all this time. Please let me introduce you around. There are so many people who would love to meet you." Before I could respond, I saw Michael approaching, his face bright with excitement at seeing me. He hadn't witnessed the earlier scene with Vanessa, had no idea what had just transpired. "Mom!" he called out, weaving through the crowd. "I'm so glad you made it. I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." He reached me and gave me a quick hug, then noticed the group I was standing with, including his very pale wife. "I see you've met everyone. These are the top brass. Mr. Walsh, Mrs. Kim. This is my mother, Margaret." Gregory and Patricia exchanged glances that spoke volumes. "Yes, we've just been getting acquainted," Gregory said carefully. "Your mother is quite impressive, Michael." Michael beamed. "I know, right? She built her own company from nothing. I grew up watching her code in our garage until midnight every night. She's the reason I went into tech. Stick with us to see how this unfolds. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and you could be the one to help us get there. Just click that button. It's right below the video. I watched Vanessa during this exchange, saw her struggling to regain her composure, to figure out how to navigate this sudden shift in dynamics. She reached for Michael's hand, squeezing it perhaps a bit too tightly. "Michael, honey, I didn't know your mother was coming tonight," she said, her voice strained but trying for casual. "You should have told me. I would have saved her a seat at our table." "I wanted it to be a surprise," Michael said happily, oblivious to the tension. "I thought it would be nice for Mom to see where I work, meet the people I talk about all the time." "It's wonderful that she's here," Patricia said warmly. "In fact, Margaret, we have a VIP table with a few empty seats. Would you like to join us for dinner? I'd love to hear about some of your early ventures. I've read your case study in the Harvard Business Review 3 times. I could feel Vanessa's panic radiating off her. The VIP table was where the company's most important people sat, the executives and the major clients. It was the table everyone in the company wanted access to. And here was the woman she had just told to leave the party being invited to the most exclusive table in the room. "That's very kind," I said. "But I think I'll sit with my son and daughter-in-law if that's all right. I came here to spend time with Michael, after all." Michael looked thrilled. "Really? That would be great, Mom. Our table is over by the windows." As we started walking toward the tables, Gregory touched my arm lightly. "Margaret, before dinner, could I steal you for just a moment? There's something I'd like to discuss about the upcoming board meeting." "Of course," I said. "Michael, Vanessa, I'll find you in a few minutes." As I walked away with Gregory and Patricia, I glanced back once. Vanessa was standing frozen, watching me go, and her expression was a mixture of horror, embarrassment, and dawning realization. Michael was talking to her, clearly asking what was wrong, but she was shaking her head, unable to explain. The conversation with Gregory and Patricia was brief but significant. They wanted to discuss a major expansion into the European market and wanted my input before presenting it to the full board. I gave them my initial thoughts, promised to review the detailed proposal they would send over, and then excused myself to find Michael. When I reached their table near the windows, Michael was sitting alone. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked. "She went to the ladies' room," he said. "She seemed upset about something, but she wouldn't tell me what." "Mom, did something happen earlier? She's acting really weird." I sat down next to him, choosing my words carefully. "Michael, I need to ask you something. Does Vanessa know what I do for a living?" He looked surprised by the question. "Of course. I mean, I've told her you ran a tech company. Why? Did you tell her the name of the company? How successful it was?" He frowned. "I don't know if I ever mentioned Chen Solutions by name. I might have? We don't really talk about my family that much. She's always more focused on work stuff, her career goals, that kind of thing." He paused. "Why are you asking?" Before I could answer, Vanessa returned. She had reapplied her lipstick and composed her face, but her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands were shaking slightly as she sat down. She looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that might have been the beginning of remorse, or might just have been fear. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next in this story. We're building something special here, working toward that 1,000 subscriber goal, and we'd love for you to be part of it. It takes just one click on that subscribe button. Dinner was served, an elaborate 5-course meal that I barely tasted. The conversation at our table was stilted and awkward. Michael kept trying to start discussions, asking Vanessa about her latest marketing campaign or telling me about a new project he was working on. But both of us were distracted. Vanessa picked at her food, barely eating, while I observed her carefully, waiting to see what she would do next. Between the 3rd and 4th courses, Michael was called away by a colleague who wanted to introduce him to someone from the Japanese firm. As soon as he left, Vanessa turned to me, her voice low and urgent. "I didn't know," she said simply. I swear to you, I had no idea who you were." "Does that matter?" I asked quietly. "Would you have treated me differently if you had known? Should that be the measure of how we treat people, based on what they can do for us?" Her face flushed. "I was rude to you earlier. I know that. I'm sorry." "You told me I looked like a housekeeper who wandered into the wrong event," I said, keeping my voice even. "You said I was damaging Michael's image and that I should call before showing up to his work events. You made me feel worthless and embarrassed at my own son's company party." Vanessa closed her eyes. "I know. I was awful. I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I was trying to protect Michael's reputation, and I thought you didn't understand how important these events are. Protect his reputation from his own mother? I let that sink in. Vanessa, I've worked in this industry for 30 years. I've attended hundreds of events like this. I understand corporate culture probably better than you do. What I don't understand is why you've treated me with such contempt since the day we met." She was silent for a long moment, her fingers twisting her napkin. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "You intimidate me." I hadn't expected that. "I intimidate you?" "Yes. You're Michael's mother. He talks about you like you're a saint. He tells stories about how you worked 3 jobs to put him through private school, how you taught him to code when he was 8, how you built this amazing career while raising him alone after his father died. How am I supposed to compete with that?" "You're not supposed to compete," I said, genuinely shocked. "Vanessa, I'm his mother. You're his wife. Those are completely different relationships. There's no competition." "That's easy for you to say. You don't see how he looks at you, how he lights up when he talks about you. His whole face changes. I wanted him to look at me like that." She paused. "And I guess I convinced myself that if I could just be different enough from you, modern and sophisticated and successful in ways you weren't, then maybe he would see me as special too." I let that sink in, feeling the complicated tangle of emotions behind her words. In some twisted way, her cruelty had come from insecurity, from feeling like she was in my shadow. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. "Michael loves you," I said firmly. "He chose you. He married you. And I have never, not once, tried to come between you or make you feel less important to him. I've barely been around because I was trying to give you space, trying not to be the overbearing mother-in-law." She nodded, tears starting to slide down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "I know, and I repaid that by being horrible to you. I don't know how to fix this." "Start by being honest," I said. "With yourself and with Michael. And start by treating people with basic respect, regardless of who they are or what they can do for you. That man you were so dismissive of at your wedding, the one in the old suit? He was David Wong, one of the pioneers of internet security. He's worth more than this entire company. But he's also just a good person who has been my friend for 20 years. I didn't introduce him as a tech legend. I introduced him as my friend. That's what matters." Vanessa wiped at her eyes. "I've been such a snob." "Yes," I agreed. "You have. But you can change. The question is whether you want to." Michael returned then, immediately noticing Vanessa's tears. "What happened? What's wrong?" If this story has you glued to your screen, do me a favor and hit subscribe. We're working hard to build this channel and reach that 1,000 subscriber milestone, and your support is everything. Just click that red button. It's quick and it's free. Vanessa looked at me, and I saw the question in her eyes. I gave a small nod. She took a deep breath. "Michael, I need to talk to you about something. About how I've been treating your mother." She glanced around at the crowded room. "But maybe not here? Can we go somewhere private?" Michael looked between us, clearly concerned. "Of course. Mom, is this okay?" "It's fine," I assured him. "Vanessa and I have had a good talk. I think you two should continue it." They left together, Vanessa's hand in Michael's, and I sat alone at the table, looking out at the fog-shrouded city lights. I felt exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but also lighter somehow, like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. Gregory approached my table a few minutes later. "Margaret, is everything all right?" I saw Michael and his wife leave looking serious. "Family matters," I said simply. "Nothing to worry about." He nodded, then hesitated. "Can I speak frankly?" "Always." "When we brought you in as an investor 2 years ago, you made it clear you wanted to remain anonymous, that you didn't want special treatment or recognition. We've honored that. But tonight, having you here, seeing how people respond to you, I'm realizing we've been missing an opportunity. Your expertise, your experience, it could be invaluable if you wanted to take a more active role in the company." I considered this. "Are you offering me a board seat?" "I'm saying we would be honored if you would consider it. No pressure. I know you value your privacy. But you should know that your investment and guidance have already shaped this company in profound ways. Making that official might benefit everyone." "Let me think about it," I said. "But Gregory, if I do accept, it has to be clear that Michael earned his position here on his own merits. I won't have people thinking he got his job because of me." "Michael is an excellent employee," Gregory assured me. "We hired him before you came on board, and we promoted him last year based purely on his performance. His last name never came up in those discussions because, frankly, most of us had no idea Chen was your name. You've always signed documents through your investment firm." "Good," I said. "I want it to stay that way." Michael and Vanessa returned about 20 minutes later, both looking like they had been crying. But they were holding hands, and there was something different in the way they moved together, more solid somehow, more real. Michael came to me first, pulling me into a tight hug. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Vanessa told me what happened, what she said to you. I had no idea she was treating you that way." "It's complicated," I said, hugging him back. "We're working through it." Vanessa stood a few feet away, looking nervous and remorseful. "Margaret, I know saying sorry isn't enough, but I want you to know that I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better." I studied her for a moment, then made a decision. I stood and walked over to her, and before she could react, I pulled her into a hug. She went rigid with surprise, then slowly relaxed, her arms coming up to hug me back. "We all make mistakes," I said softly, just for her to hear. "What matters is what we do after. You're family now. That means something to me, even if I don't always know how to show it." When I pulled back, she was crying again, but these tears seemed different, cleaner somehow. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Word had somehow spread that I was Michael's mother, and suddenly people who had ignored me earlier were coming over to introduce themselves, to chat, to network. I handled it with the same grace I had used in business for decades, but I stayed close to Michael and Vanessa, making it clear that I was there as a mother first, investor second. Don't forget to subscribe before you move on to another video. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription makes a difference. Click that button and help us reach our goal together. Around 10 o'clock, I told Michael I was going to head home. I was tired, and I had an early meeting the next morning with a startup that wanted to discuss funding. He insisted on walking me out to get my Uber. As we stood outside the Fairmont, the San Francisco fog rolling in thick and cold around us, Michael took my hand. "Mom, there's something I need to know. Vanessa mentioned that Mr. Walsh called you an investor in Tech Vista. Is that true?" I had been expecting this question. I looked at my son, this man I had raised alone, who had turned out so much better than I could have hoped, and I decided he deserved the truth. "Yes," I said simply. 2 years ago, the company was struggling. They were going to have to lay off half their staff and probably fold within 6 months. A venture capital firm I work with brought me the opportunity to invest. I looked at the books, met with the leadership, and decided it was worth saving. Michael's eyes widened. You invested in my company? How much? Enough that I have a seat on the board if I want it. Enough that I'm listed as a primary stakeholder. I squeezed his hand. But Michael, I need you to understand something crucial. I didn't know you worked there when I made that investment. You had just started. You were so new that your name didn't come up in any of the employee reviews I looked at. By the time I realized you were there, the deal was done. But you could have told me, he said, though he didn't sound angry, just confused. Why keep it secret? Because I wanted you to succeed on your own merits. I wanted you to get promoted because you were good at your job, not because your mother was a major investor. I wanted you to feel proud of what you accomplished without wondering if I had pulled strings behind the scenes. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this. A Uber pulled up to the curb, my ride, but neither of us moved. Did you pull strings? He asked finally. Never, not once. Gregory confirmed it tonight. They didn't even know Chen was my last name until this evening. You got hired before I invested. You got your promotion based on your work. Everything you've achieved at Tech Vista is 100% yours. Michael pulled me into another hug, holding on tight. I don't know whether to be mad at you for keeping this secret or grateful that you believed in me enough to let me do it alone. Be whatever you need to be, I said into his shoulder. I can take it. He laughed, a wet sound that told me he was crying a little. I love you, Mom. Thank you for always having my back, even when I didn't know you were there. That's what mothers do, I said simply. We're the safety net you never see until you need us. I got into my Uber and watched through the rear window as Michael stood on the sidewalk, waving until we turned the corner. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't waste it. And thank you for loving Michael enough to let him find his own way. I'm starting to understand what kind of woman you are, and I hope someday I can be half as strong. I typed back a simple response. See you for Sunday dinner. Come early. We'll cook together. The next few weeks were transformative. Vanessa started coming to my house more often. First for those Sunday dinners, then for coffee during the week, then just to talk. We were getting to know each other, really know each other, without the barriers of pride and insecurity that had kept us apart. She told me about growing up in a working-class family in Los Angeles, about being the first person in her family to go to college, about the pressure she felt to prove herself in the corporate world where everyone seemed to come from money and connections. She told me about the imposter syndrome that haunted her, the fear that someone would realize she didn't belong in those boardrooms and fancy offices. I told her about my own journey, about being a young Asian woman in tech in the 90s, when there were almost no other women in the room, about the investors who refused to take me seriously, about building Chen Solutions line by line of code while pregnant with Michael, and dealing with morning sickness. We found common ground in our struggles, in our determination to prove ourselves, in our love for Michael. And slowly, carefully, we built something that started to feel like family. If you've been enjoying this journey, I need to ask you one more time to subscribe. We're building a community here, sharing real stories about real people, and we need you to be part of it. Click that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything. Michael noticed the change. He started inviting me to more events. Not work things, but personal celebrations. Dinners with their friends. A weekend trip to Monterey where we watched the otters and ate too much seafood. Vanessa was warmer, more open, and I saw glimpses of the woman my son had fallen in love with. The brilliant and driven person who existed under all that armor. 3 months after the gala, Gregory officially offered me a seat on the Tech Vista board, and I accepted. My first meeting was interesting because several board members had no idea who I was, despite being a major investor. I had been so hands-off, communicating only through my lawyers and accountants. But now I was there in person, and I could see the calculations happening behind their eyes as they tried to figure out who I was and what I wanted. What I wanted was simple. I wanted Tech Vista to succeed, to grow, to become the kind of company that treated its employees well and created products that mattered. I wanted Michael to have a stable, thriving place to build his career, and I wanted to use my experience to help guide younger entrepreneurs the way I wished someone had guided me 30 years ago. The board meetings became one of my favorite parts of the month. I loved the strategic discussions, the problem solving, the chance to shape the company's direction. And I loved that Michael had no idea what happened in those meetings, that he continued to work and excel without knowing his mother was in the room where decisions about his company were made. Vanessa got a big promotion 6 months after the gala, moving up to vice president of marketing. She earned it through a brilliant campaign that increased Tech Vista's brand recognition by 40% in key markets. When she told me about it over dinner at my house, she was glowing with pride and excitement. I keep waiting for someone to say I only got it because of your connection to the company, she admitted. But no one has. My boss said it was based entirely on my results from the last 2 quarters. Because it was, I assured her. Vanessa, I sit on the board. I see the metrics. Your campaign was genuinely impressive. You earned this. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. A year ago, I would have assumed you pulled strings. I would have been unable to just accept that I'm good at my job. Thank you for helping me see myself more clearly. You did that yourself, I said. I just stopped letting you tear me down, which gave you space to stop tearing yourself down too. One Sunday evening, almost a year after the gala, the 3 of us were sitting in my backyard, drinking wine and watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Michael had just finished telling a long story about a disastrous client meeting that had somehow turned into their biggest deal of the quarter, and we were all laughing. Mom, Michael said suddenly, I never thanked you properly for what you did at that party. What did I do? I asked, genuinely curious about which part he meant. You gave Vanessa grace. You could have humiliated her in front of everyone, could have used your position to make her life difficult. You had every right to be angry, to lash out. But you didn't. You gave her room to apologize, to grow, to become better. That's the kind of person I want to be. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. You already are that kind of person, Michael. You learned it from your father. He was the most forgiving person I ever knew. Vanessa reached over and took my hand. I was so wrong about you. I thought you were simple, ordinary, maybe even a little pathetic for living such a quiet life. But you're one of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. You just don't need everyone to know it. I spent the first 20 years of my career trying to prove myself, I said. I wanted recognition, awards, acknowledgement. I wanted people to know I had made it. But somewhere along the way, I realized that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the work itself, the problems I could solve, the people I could help, and my relationship with my son. Everything else was just noise. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you one last time to please subscribe to this channel. We've shared this entire journey with you, and we hope you'll join our community by clicking that subscribe button. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. It takes 2 seconds and means the world to us. The evening grew dark and cold, and we moved inside to my kitchen, where Vanessa and I made pasta together, while Michael opened another bottle of wine. We talked about everything and nothing, about work and family and the new restaurant that had opened on Judah Street. It was ordinary and perfect, the kind of evening I had dreamed of having with my son and daughter-in-law, but had thought might never happen. As they were leaving, Vanessa hugged me tight at the door. I love you, Margaret, she said, and I could tell she meant it. I love you too, I replied, and realized with some surprise that I did. After they left, I cleaned up the kitchen and thought about that night at the Fairmont, about standing in that glittering ballroom feeling small and worthless. I thought about Vanessa's cruel words, about the humiliation I had felt, about the moment when everything shifted and she realized who I really was. But more than that, I thought about what came after, about the hard conversations and the slow rebuilding of trust, about two women who had started as adversaries learning to see each other as allies, as family, about my son who had brought us together even when we were determined to stay apart. Success isn't just about building companies or making money or having power. Success is about knowing who you are, about treating people with dignity, regardless of what they can do for you, about creating space for others to grow even when they've hurt you. Success is measured in Sunday dinners and shared laughter and relationships that survived their worst moments to become something stronger. I turned off the lights in my modest house in the Sunset District, this house that Vanessa had once looked down on, and felt completely content. I had built an empire, yes. I had wealth and influence and a reputation in the tech world. But none of that mattered as much as the fact that my son was happy, that my daughter-in-law had become someone I genuinely cared about, and that I had stayed true to myself throughout it all. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Michael. It was a photo of him and Vanessa at breakfast, both of them smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Thanks for showing us what real strength looks like. Mom, we love you." I smiled, saved the photo, and started my day. I had a board meeting at 10, a lunch with a young entrepreneur who needed advice, and dinner plans with my sister. It was an ordinary day, in an extraordinary life, and I was grateful for all of it. 6 months later, Vanessa came to me with news that made my heart soar. She was pregnant. Michael was going to be a father, and I was going to be a grandmother. As she told me, tears streaming down her face, I saw in her expression something I never thought I would see. She was looking to me for guidance, for support, for motherly wisdom. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this. My own mother and I aren't close. I don't have a good model for what a mother should be." I took her hands in mine. "Then we'll figure it out together. And Vanessa, I promise you, you're going to be an amazing mother. You're strong and smart and capable of incredible growth. I've watched you transform this past year. Your child is lucky to have you." "I want to be the kind of mother you are," she said softly. "Patient and wise and willing to let my kids make their own mistakes while being there to catch them when they fall." "Then you will be," I assured her, "because you've already learned the hardest lesson, that being strong doesn't mean being perfect. It means being willing to admit when you're wrong and do better." As I held my crying daughter-in-law in my arms, I thought about that night at the Fairmont one more time. I thought about how close we had come to permanent estrangement, how easily this relationship could have been destroyed before it ever really began. But we had chosen differently. We had chosen growth over grudges, understanding over resentment, family over pride. And now, there was a new generation coming, a grandchild who would grow up knowing their grandmother not as a tech mogul or a corporate legend, but as someone who showed up, who loved unconditionally, who proved that real power isn't about dominating others, but about lifting them up. That's the legacy I want to leave. Not Chen Solutions, not the millions of dollars in the bank, not the board positions or the industry awards. I want to be remembered as someone who treated everyone with dignity, who gave second chances, who understood that we're all just trying to figure it out, and sometimes we need grace to become who we're meant to be. Michael and Vanessa's daughter was born on a foggy San Francisco morning in March, and they named her Margaret Grace Chen. When Vanessa told me the name, I cried harder than I had in years. "Grace for second chances," Vanessa explained, "and Margaret because we want her to be as strong and kind as her grandmother." I held my granddaughter for the first time in that hospital room, this tiny, perfect person who represented everything good that could come from choosing forgiveness and growth. Michael stood next to me, his hand on my shoulder, while Vanessa watched from the bed with exhausted, joyful eyes. "She's going to know her grandmother," Michael said firmly. She's going to grow up hearing stories about how you built a company in a garage and changed an industry. But more importantly, she's going to grow up seeing how you treat people, how you move through the world with quiet strength. That's what I want her to learn from you. As I looked down at baby Grace's sleeping face, I made her a silent promise. I would be there for her, for all of them, in whatever way they needed. I would continue to build my legacy not through business deals and board meetings, but through Sunday dinners and bedtime stories and being present for the moments that really matter. The story could have ended so differently. If I had responded to Vanessa's cruelty with cruelty of my own, if I had used my power to hurt her the way she had hurt me, if I had let my pride dictate my actions instead of my values. But I didn't. And because of that choice, I gained a daughter, strengthened my relationship with my son, and now had a granddaughter who would grow up in a family built on forgiveness and growth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If it touched you in any way, if it made you think about grace and second chances, please subscribe to our channel. We're working hard to build a community of people who believe in real stories about real growth, and we'd love for you to be part of it. Click that subscribe button and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. That night at the Fairmont Hotel, when Vanessa looked me up and down and called me a housekeeper in front of everyone, she thought she knew who had the power in that room. She thought it was the people with the expensive clothes and the impressive titles and the air of sophistication. But real power doesn't announce itself. Real power doesn't need to prove anything. Real power is knowing who you are and being comfortable enough in your own skin that someone else's opinion can't shake you. I walked into that ballroom as Margaret Chen, mother and investor and self-made woman. I walked out the same person, but with a deeper understanding of what really matters and a clearer vision of the legacy I want to leave. Not a legacy of dominance or control, but a legacy of grace, of second chances, of choosing love over pride. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, treating people with dignity, and building something beautiful out of the moments that could have destroyed you. That's what I chose. And in the end, it gave me everything I never knew I needed. A real relationship with my daughter-in-law, a stronger bond with my son, and a granddaughter who carries my name not because I demanded it, but because they wanted to honor what I represent. The gala was just one night, one moment in a lifetime of moments. But it was the catalyst that changed everything, that forced us all to confront who we really were and who we wanted to become. And for that, despite the pain and humiliation of that initial encounter, I'm grateful. Because in the end, Vanessa didn't just learn who signs her paycheck. She learned something far more valuable. That the measure of a person isn't their bank account, or their job title, or their designer clothes. It's how they treat others, when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. It's whether they're willing to grow, to change, to become better versions of themselves. And I learned something too. I learned that I had let too much time pass in silence, had been too willing to accept crumbs of affection from my son's wife, instead of demanding the respect I deserved. I learned that sometimes you have to show people who you are before they can see you clearly, not to dominate them, not to put them in their place, but to create the space for honest, real connection. That's the story I want to end with. Not the moment of dramatic revelation at the party, though that was certainly satisfying in its own way, but the year that followed, the hard work of building a real family out of the wreckage of assumptions and resentments. The Sunday dinners and the late-night conversations and the slow, careful reconstruction of trust. Because that's real life. It's not about the big dramatic moments that make good stories. It's about showing up day after day, choosing love over convenience, choosing growth over comfort, choosing family over pride. And if you learned something from this story, if it made you think differently about second chances or family dynamics or the quiet power of dignity, then please subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Help us build this community of people who believe that real strength comes from kindness, not cruelty. Click that subscribe button right now and be part of reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Little Grace is 6 months old now. Last Sunday, I watched Vanessa with her, saw the patience and tenderness in the way she handled her daughter, and I saw glimpses of the woman I had hoped she would become. Michael was there too, taking photos and making everyone laugh, being the father his own father would have been proud of. And as we sat there in my backyard, 3 generations of women together, I thought about power and legacy and what really matters. I thought about the Margaret Chen who walked into that Fairmont ballroom feeling nervous and uncertain, and I realized she had nothing to be nervous about, because she had always been exactly who she needed to be. The woman in the simple navy dress who was mistaken for a housekeeper. She was a titan of industry who had revolutionized cloud security. But more importantly, she was a mother who loved her son enough to let him find his own way. She was a woman who chose grace over grudges. She was a grandmother who would teach her granddaughter that real power whispers while weakness shouts. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. And that night at the party, when my daughter-in-law finally saw me clearly for the first time, she didn't just see an investor or a tech mogul or someone who could make or break her career. She saw who I really am. A woman who knows her worth, who treats everyone with dignity, who builds bridges instead of walls, and who understands that the most powerful thing you can do is give someone a second chance to be better. And the best part? I never had to tell her any of that. I just had to show her, day after day, choice after choice, until she could see it for herself. That's the kind of power that lasts. That's the kind of legacy I want to leave. I thought she was just an ordinary housewife, until I realized she owned the company where I was trying to build my career and had been silent all this time.